Long before temples were constructed or empires were given names, the Holy Land was already filling with ruins. Beneath every hill lies a hidden story. Each valley carries the fading voices of peoples who once believed their civilizations would last forever. This land is more than a sacred landscape. It is an enormous graveyard of the ancient world. Civilizations began here, flourished, fought wars and vanished, leaving behind what now appears as quiet earth and drifting dust. Archaeologists continue to uncover entire cities that time has buried deep underground. In this documentary, we will bring to light 8 of these forgotten cities. We will recreate their moments of greatness, uncover the powers that led to their destruction, and examine what has survived into the present day. Some remain only in broken pieces, while others have nearly vanished from memory. A few have histories so brutal that they sound like myths, until physical evidence from the ground confirms them. Around 1400 BC, one of these cities was not merely occupied, it was almost impossible to conquer. It was built on a tell, a man-made mound formed by repeated cycles of ruin and rebuilding. The city spread across roughly 3 hectares at the top of a strategically positioned hill. Long before the biblical era, the land beneath it had already been razed and rebuilt nearly 20 times. Beneath the streets linked to the time of Joshua, archaeologists uncovered layers revealing over 11,000 years of human presence. Among these remains stands a massive stone tower dating back to approximately 8,500 BC, recognized as one of the earliest monumental structures ever discovered by archaeologists. Jericho's ability to endure was not accidental. Warfare shaped its past. Inside its walls, the city operated with remarkable efficiency. Homes built of mud brick lined paved streets. Deep cisterns stored water, and granaries overflowed with grain. The spring of Elisha, still flowing today, supplied the city with fresh water year-round. Merchants passed through its gates carrying spices from the east, fabrics from the north, and metals from the south. Jericho held control over the entrance to the Jordan Valley. Anyone seeking to climb into the highlands of Canaan had to pass through Jericho and pay a toll. Its greatest display of strength was found in its fortifications. Jericho was protected not by a single wall, but by a complex double wall system. The outer stone wall rose about 3.5 meters high, with an even taller wall behind it. Passageways between the two allowed soldiers to move quickly. The foundation was so wide that homes were built directly within the defensive walls. Rahab, who aided the Israelite spies, lived in one of these houses, with a window facing beyond the city walls. Today, Tel es-Sultan stands as a UNESCO World Heritage Site. Walking through it reveals 11,000 years of human history layered one above another. The ancient stone tower still stands tall. Fragments of the city's walls continue to challenge the passage of time. It is difficult not to reflect on the idea that this city endured for thousands of years before falling at the sound of a shout. Jericho's fall was extraordinary, but the next city met a very different fate. It did not collapse with noise. It was destroyed from above. Even now, the ground is scattered with melted pottery and fused materials. For many years, archaeologists and historians searched deserts, plains, and valleys for evidence of Sodom and Gomorrah. Many modern scholars dismiss these cities as symbolic stories, moral warnings shaped into legends meant to inspire fear rather than record history. That perspective began to change in 2013. Near the Dead Sea, an international research team identified an archaeological site that challenged long-held assumptions. The site was Tall el-Hammam. As excavations progressed, researchers found signs of destruction unlike those caused by conventional warfare or slow decline. The city uncovered was clearly far from insignificant, and its remains raised serious and unsettling questions. Situated on rich, fertile land with an abundant water supply and located along a major trade route, Tall el-Hammam thrived for hundreds of years. Scholars estimate that between 8,000 and 10,000 people lived there, making it a true Bronze Age metropolis. Strong, thick walls surrounded the city. Palaces and temples reflected an advanced political structure, economic strength, and influence over the surrounding region. Sodom, it appears, was not a small settlement lost to history. It was a powerful and dominant urban center. According to the biblical narrative, Sodom's downfall was not caused by hunger or lack of resources, but by excess. The society was defined by pride, arrogance, and moral corruption so severe that, as described in Genesis, it surpassed every acceptable limit. The text explains that in response, God chose to intervene directly in human affairs. Judgment followed. Fire and sulfur rained down from the heavens. The destruction was sudden, complete, and final. In a single day, the city was erased from existence. Lot and his family escaped in haste, and when Lot's wife disobeyed the command and looked back, she was turned into a pillar of salt. The story sounds cinematic, but unlike legends, the ground preserves evidence that does not disappear with time. At Tall el-Hammam, archaeologists uncovered signs of a massive explosion dating to roughly 3,700 years ago. Temperatures soared beyond 2,000 degrees Celsius. Pottery was vitrified and transformed into glass. Clay bricks shattered violently under the intense heat. Even more unsettling were the thick layers of salt spread across the land, in quantities great enough to render the soil unusable for 6 to 7 centuries. Nothing could grow. The land itself died alongside the city. Several explanations have been proposed. Some suggest a meteorite impact. Others point to an airburst similar to the Tunguska event, or a sudden and violent release of gases. The scientific debate is ongoing. Yet one fact remains undeniable. Something catastrophic destroyed that city with extreme force, leaving lasting physical damage in the very area where the Bible places Sodom. Today, Tall el-Hammam stands as an open archaeological site. The destruction layers are still visible. Melted ceramics remain scattered across the ground, preserved as if time stopped. They serve as a silent testimony to a day when the sky appeared to burn. Sodom was destroyed from above. The next city, however, would be destroyed from below, and Joshua ensured it was the only city in Canaan to be completely annihilated. Why? Because it was the capital, because it concentrated power, and because it was home to roughly 40,000 people. Hazor was not an ordinary city. It was one of the great metropolitan centers of the ancient world. For perspective, Jerusalem during the reign of King David, centuries later, had a smaller population. At its height, Hazor covered roughly 80 hectares in the upper city and an additional 70 hectares in the lower city. Enormous stone walls enclosed the entire area. Inside stood columned palaces, temples devoted to Baal and Astarte, bronze working facilities, granaries filled with grain, paved roads and public fountains that supplied water to the population. Merchants from Syria, Egypt and Cyprus conducted business in the city's main square. Hazor controlled the northern trade routes. Anyone traveling toward Mesopotamia had to pass through the city and pay taxes or tolls. Yet Hazor represented more than economic prosperity. It was also a center of military power. Its king ruled over a coalition of city-states. When Joshua entered the land of Canaan, it was the king of Hazor who organized the resistance. He summoned the other kings, gathered their armies, and established a military camp by the waters of Merom. This force, made up of chariots, cavalry, and heavily armed infantry, was the largest army the Israelites had faced up to that time. Joshua defeated them. But one detail is especially important. Among all the conquered cities, only Hazor was completely burned. The others were left standing for settlement. Hazor was meant to serve as a warning. Between 1955 and 1958, the archaeologist Yigael Yadin excavated the site. Additional digs in the 1960s revealed 21 layers of human settlement. One layer, however, clearly stands apart. It contains thick ash deposits and collapsed buildings, all carbon dated to around 1200 BC, precisely the era traditionally associated with Joshua. In 2012, a team led by Amnon Bentor uncovered storage jars filled with charred wheat. The grain had been stored and was ready for consumption, indicating that the city fell suddenly. There was no time to evacuate. The destruction was swift and overwhelming. Later excavations also revealed an impressive water system, including a tunnel descending 40 meters to the water table, which was expanded centuries later by King Ahab. A massive basalt staircase, 4.5 meters wide, once led up to the royal palace. Today, Hazor has been recognized as a UNESCO World Heritage Site since 2005. alongside Megiddo and Beersheba. It lies about 14 kilometers north of the Sea of Galilee. Walking through the site, visitors can still see sections of the walls, palace foundations, and the monumental staircase. The jars containing burned wheat are now preserved in the Israel Museum in Jerusalem. Yet no one lives there anymore. What was once the greatest city in Canaan has turned to dust. Joshua burned the capital of the land. But another city would later face a curse. Not from Joshua, but from Jesus. And this was no ordinary place. It was the city where he lived and where he performed more miracles than anywhere else. What does it mean when the place that witnessed the most miracles is also the place chosen for a curse? That question arises when we look at Capernaum, a lively, successful, and crowded city that appeared full of faith but lacked true repentance. Located on the northern shore of the Sea of Galilee, Capernaum held a highly strategic position. The Via Maris, the major trade route connecting Egypt and Syria, passed directly by its gates. Caravans stopped there to rest, trade goods, and replenish their supplies. A Roman customs station operated there, where Matthew worked as a tax collector. Fishing boats departed each morning and returned with nets overflowing with fish. The marketplace was alive with activity, selling bread, olive oil, pottery, and woven cloth. With a population of roughly 15,000 people, it was a mid-sized city, yet economically stable and comfortable. At the heart of the city stood a synagogue constructed from black basalt, with strong pillars holding up the roof. It served as the spiritual center of Capernaum. Every Sabbath, men gathered there to read the Torah, discuss the law, and pray together. It was in this very place that Jesus began his public teaching. The Gospel of Matthew refers to Capernaum as his own city. Jesus did not simply visit it, he lived there. Peter, James, John, and Andrew all had homes in Capernaum, and after traveling elsewhere, Jesus repeatedly returned to the city. More miracles occurred there than anywhere else. A centurion's servant was healed from afar. Peter's mother-in-law was cured of her fever. A paralyzed man was lowered through the roof when the house was too crowded, and Jesus healed him before everyone watching. Demons were cast out. Storms were silenced. The entire city witnessed these events, yet witnessing did not lead to faith. The miracles became entertainment. People observed and listened, but they did not repent. Then Jesus did something without precedent. He pronounced a curse on the city where he had lived. In Matthew chapter 11, he declared that Capernaum would be brought down to the depths, and that if Sodom had witnessed the same works Capernaum had seen, it would still exist. The fulfillment of this judgment unfolded slowly. After the 6th century, Capernaum was gradually abandoned. In 1894, the Franciscan order purchased the land and began systematic excavations. Between 1968 and 1985, archaeologists Virgilio Corbo and Stanislao Lofreda identified what they believed to be Peter's house beneath a 5th century Byzantine octagonal church. The white limestone synagogue visible today was built directly over the foundations of the 1st century basalt synagogue, the exact place where Jesus taught. Coins and construction materials confirm these dates. Today, Capernaum is administered by the custody of the Holy Land. It stands as a quiet ruin, a city that saw the Son of God and rejected him. Capernaum rejected Jesus. The next city, however, was not cursed by him. Instead, it had been foretold about 600 years earlier that it would be abandoned, and today no one lives there at all. At its height, Ashkelon had around 13,000 inhabitants. Built along the coastline, it possessed a naturally protected harbor. Ships from Cyprus, Greece, and Egypt arrived there every day. Behind massive walls reaching up to 15 meters high and 50 meters thick at the base, city life flourished. Markets sold Tyrian purple dye, marble from Athens, and grain from Egypt. Temples dedicated to Dagon and Baal-zebub dominated the city center. Palaces surrounded by gardens filled the elite districts of the city. The Philistines were never the crude or uncivilized people they are often portrayed to be. They possessed a refined culture, carefully planned urban design, advanced metalworking skills, and a lively city life. Ashkelon clearly demonstrated this level of development. Yet in the eyes of Israel's prophets, something there was fundamentally wrong. The issue was not military strength or economic success. It was spiritual. Ashkelon represented everything Israel was warned not to become. Idols dominated its temples, and religious practices considered detestable were part of everyday worship. Because of this, prophets across generations announced judgment against the city. Amos, Zephaniah, and Jeremiah all spoke words of condemnation toward Ashkelon. However, it was Zechariah who made the most direct and striking statement. Ashkelon would be left deserted. In 604 BC, Nebuchadnezzar II, king of Babylon, invaded the region. Ashkelon attempted to defend itself by sealing its gates, strengthening its walls, and storing supplies. None of it succeeded. The Babylonian forces broke through the defenses, executed the king, and deported the population. The city was destroyed. What makes this remarkable is that Ashkelon was later rebuilt. Greeks occupied it, followed by Romans and then Byzantines. Yet it never regained its former importance. Over time, it slowly declined and was eventually abandoned. In 1191, Richard the Lionheart destroyed what remained of the city to prevent its harbor from being used by Muslim forces. After that, it was never rebuilt. Today, Ashkelon is a national park. Archaeologists have uncovered the first Philistine cemetery ever found there, containing 145 skeletons, along with figurines, painted pottery, gold jewelry, and other remains of a once prosperous culture. Yet no one lives there. The prophecy was fulfilled. The next city, however, did not fade away gradually. It endured one of the most severe military sieges in ancient history, and even its enemies recorded the event in stone. The Assyrians constructed a massive siege ramp using approximately 3 million stones to capture the city, and they carved the event into reliefs stretching 27 meters in length. Lachish was the second most important city in the Kingdom of Judah, surpassed only by Jerusalem. Built on a strategically placed hill, it controlled the route between the coastal plain and the Judean highlands. Any army attempting to attack Jerusalem from the west had to pass through Lachish. For this reason, King Rehoboam heavily fortified the city. Double walls surrounded it, the outer wall 6 meters thick and the inner wall 4 meters thick. Watchtowers covered every approach. A monumental gate with 6 chambers regulated entry into the city. Inside were limestone houses, workshops, storage facilities, and cisterns that supported a population of about 6,000 people. But in 701 BC, Sennacherib, king of Assyria, invaded Judah. He had already captured 46 cities and deported more than 200,000 people. Now he set his sights on Lachish, and he wanted the entire world to witness it. The siege was carefully planned and merciless. The ramp still exists today, a massive structure built from millions of stones, each one carried by hand by Assyrian soldiers. As the ramp slowly climbed toward the city walls, archers fired non-stop to keep the defenders pinned down. Siege towers rolled forward, battering rams smashed against the fortifications. Inside the city, disorder spread. Archaeological excavations uncovered ash layers reaching up to 6 meters thick. Arrowheads were found lodged in the walls. Skeletons of people killed while trying to escape lay scattered across the site. One mass grave contained more than 1,500 bodies, dumped together without ceremony or respect. Lachish was defeated. Sennacherib was so proud of his victory that he ordered it carved into monumental stone reliefs. Today, these scenes can be seen in the British Museum. They show soldiers advancing, prisoners being impaled, and entire families marched away into exile. This record remains the most detailed visual depiction of an ancient siege ever preserved. Although Lachish was rebuilt later, it never recovered its former importance. Today, it is simply a tell, an archaeological mound. Visitors climb the hill, see the remains of the siege ramp and the shattered walls, and can almost imagine the fear that once filled the city. Lachish endured the most brutal military siege, but the next capital suffered something even more destructive, not weapons, but famine. A famine so severe that it shattered human reason. A famine that led to the unimaginable, a mother cooking her own child. This tragedy occurred in Samaria, the capital of the northern kingdom of Israel. Samaria was no ordinary city. It was wealthy, exceptionally wealthy. Around 880 BC, King Omri selected a strategically placed hill and chose to build a new capital entirely from the ground up. This was not a renovation of an older settlement, but a carefully planned urban project. The hill rose about 90 meters above the surrounding valley, providing full visibility in every direction. Double walls of white limestone reflected sunlight from afar, standing as a clear symbol of strength and security. The palace of Ahab, Omri's son, represented the peak of luxury. Its walls were decorated with carved panels made of real ivory, not paint or imitation, but genuine ivory imported from Africa. Entire rooms were lined with these panels, which is why the Bible refers to it as the Ivory House in 1 Kings chapter 22. Within the city, life flowed in abundance. Rock-cut cisterns guaranteed water supplies even during long periods of drought. Storehouses were filled with wine, olive oil, and grain. Markets offered Tyrian purple dye, spices from Arabia, and jewelry from Egypt. Scholars estimate that Samaria had a population of about 30,000 people. It was not only the political capital, it was the ultimate symbol of prosperity for the northern kingdom. But in 735 BC, King Hoshea made a disastrous decision. He stopped paying tribute to Assyria. Shalmaneser V responded in the way the Assyrians were known for: slow, calculated cruelty. His army surrounded Samaria, but did not immediately attack its walls. Instead, they cut off all access. Nothing was allowed in, nothing was allowed out, and they waited. The first year of the siege exhausted the city's supplies. In the second year of the siege, the animals were slaughtered for food. By the third year, nothing remained. That was when the horror described in 2 Kings chapter 6 took place. Two women made an unthinkable agreement. They cooked and ate one woman's son. The following day, when it was the other woman's turn to keep the pact, she hid her child instead. In 722 BC, the city's defenses finally collapsed. Sargon II, who had taken the Assyrian throne, entered Samaria and deported 27,290 people. Modern archaeological work has confirmed that the ivory palace mentioned in the Bible stood exactly on that hill. Original fragments of the ivory panels were discovered and are now preserved in museums in Jerusalem. The hill, known today as Sebastia, is no longer inhabited. It has become an important archaeological site where the ruins of the palace, city walls, and ancient temples are still visible. Samaria perished through famine. But the next city is unique. It did not fall once. It fell 26 times. And according to prophecy, it will fall again in the final conflict of history. There is a place in the Holy Land where 26 major battles have already been fought. Its name is Megiddo, called Armageddon in Greek. Megiddo occupies a position any military commander would want to control. The Tell, an archaeological mound rising about 20 meters high, overlooks the Jezreel Valley. From its summit, vast stretches of flat land can be seen in every direction. The Via Maris, the most important trade route of the ancient world, passed directly through this location. Egyptian armies traveling toward Mesopotamia had to cross Megiddo. Mesopotamian forces marching toward Egypt had to do the same. There was no alternative route. Whoever held Megiddo controlled the military movement and commercial traffic of the entire region. For this reason, 26 different civilizations occupied the same site. Canaanites built there. Egyptians destroyed and rebuilt it. Israelites captured it. Philistines attacked it. Assyrians expanded it. Persians ruled it. Greeks took control. Romans dominated it. Each empire constructed its city on top of the ruins of the previous one. Layer after layer, century after century, the mound grew. An artificial hill formed from stacked, fallen cities. King Solomon turned Megiddo into one of the strongest fortresses in his kingdom. Understanding its strategic importance, he reinforced it with thick, defensive walls, built large stables capable of holding around 450 horses, and ordered the construction of an advanced water system carved into the rock. This tunnel descended roughly 40 meters to the water table, allowing the city to survive even during long sieges. The main city gate featured 6 chambers, identical to those found at Hazor and Giza. Same architect, same design, same defensive strategy. Megiddo was not an isolated stronghold, but a key part of a nationwide defense network. And for that very reason, it was constantly drawn into conflict. In 609 BC, Pharaoh Necho II of Egypt marched north to support Assyria against the rising power of Babylon. His goal was not to attack Judah, but simply to pass through the region. King Josiah, however, chose to block his advance at Megiddo. It was a fatal decision. Necho attempted to avoid battle, but Josiah persisted. The confrontation was short and tragic. An arrow struck the king of Judah, and he died while being taken back to Jerusalem. The most righteous ruler of his generation fell while defending a strategic corridor that has always attracted war. Centuries later, in 1799, Napoleon Bonaparte passed through Megiddo during his Eastern campaign. After studying the terrain, he described it as the perfect battlefield. He understood military geography well. The Jezreel Valley is wide and flat, offers complete visibility, and provides constant access to water. It is capable of holding entire armies on the move. That is why the Book of Revelation identifies this exact location as the site of the final battle in human history. In Hebrew, it is called Har Megiddo, and in Greek, Armageddon, the mountain where prophecy says the armies of the world will gather at the end of time. Today, Megiddo is a national park and a UNESCO World Heritage Site, together with Hazor and Beersheba. As visitors climb the tell, they can clearly observe the 26 layers of destruction that have built up over thousands of years. The remains of the stables attributed to Solomon are visible, along with the 6-chambered gate and the water system carved deep into the rock. From the summit, one looks out over the quiet, empty plain, imagining how many times this land has already been soaked with blood, and reflecting on a prophecy that still points toward the future. See you soon.